Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Israel says one of 4 bodies handed over by Hamas overnight does not match any of the hostages. Pakistan and Afghanistan agreed to a 48-hour ceasefire following a wave of fresh fighting and an airstrike. Right-wing US influencer Candace Owens has been blocked from entering Australia after officials say her controversial views could incite discord. Now, Israel has said one of the 4 bodies handed over by Hamas overnight does not match any of the hostages. As part of the first phase of the Gaza peace plan, Hamas was required to return all 48 remaining hostages. So far, all 20 living hostages and 7 hostages' bodies have been returned. In response, Israel has threatened to restrict aid into Gaza and delay reopening of the Rafah crossing. For more on this, I'm joined by Brigadier General Yossi Kuperwasser, head of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and for Security. Thank you so much for joining me this evening.
Thank you, Leigh-Ann, for having me.
Hamas says it returned 4 more hostages last night, but Israel says one of the bodies doesn't match any of the captives. Is this chaos putting the ceasefire under enormous strain?
I wouldn't say enormous, but under a lot of strain, because Hamas was supposed to deliver the 28 dead bodies by Monday. And, this didn't happen on time, and not even one was delivered on time. And then we have a trickle of bodies coming in. More are expected today, and one of them was not even a body of an Israeli hostage. It was a body of somebody we don't know who he was. So this is unaccepted and unacceptable, and we are going to put pressure on Hamas in order to do what they are supposed to do according to the agreement.
The Red Cross said returning hostage bodies from Gaza may take time, given the difficulties of finding remains in the rubble following intense Israeli bombardment. What do you make of this analysis? And is Israel aware that the bombardment did hamper this search effort?
Well, first of all, I think this is highly exaggerated. They must know the whereabouts of most of the bodies. It can't be that they know the location of only so few. They must know much more than that. And it's a political game. It's most of all, it's a political game. Yes, they might have difficulties with some of the bodies. Israel never bombarded any place that we thought there are the remains of any of the hostages in. And we have some information, and there's a new structure of experts that are supposed to deliver information from Israel to Hamas about the whereabouts of some of the bodies that we have some information about. But this should be solved within a short period of time. This is not a matter of weeks. This is a matter of a few days at most. It should be solved because we have information and they have information about the location of the bodies.
Israel has confirmed that the Rafah crossing will not open again today. The UN Commission has said Israel has committed genocide in Gaza. Why is Israel limiting much-needed aid to the Palestinian people?
First of all, we don't want to limit the aid, but this is part of the agreement. The aid is conditioned on releasing the hostages and the bodies of the dead hostages. And if this is not going to happen, why are we supposed to do what we are supposed to do in this agreement? There's a clear connection between one and the other. And anyhow, there's no shortage of food and other necessary stuff, necessary material in the Gaza Strip. There's enough. There's more than enough because we have allowed everything coming in for a long time now. So there's no problem of that. And the UN committee that spoke about Israeli genocide is a totally biased committee made of Israel haters. And we should not fall prey to this propaganda.
So it's interesting that you say there's enough aid going in, because the UN humanitarian chief Tom Fletcher today has been speaking to different news organizations, and he said Israel should immediately open crossings into Gaza for humanitarian aid as part of the ceasefire deal. It should happen now. We want it to happen immediately as part of the agreement. So the UN humanitarian chief is calling on Israel to open up the crossings to get much needed medical there's no medical supplies in Gaza. That's what they're saying. There's not enough food. Do you not agree with what he's saying?
No, I don't agree with what he's saying. I think the UN lost its credibility long ago, and we cannot trust anything that the UN is saying. And they should read the agreement. The agreement says that we are going to allow all this aid in once the hostages are back, and the hostages are not back. So, and we are letting aid in. It's just that we're restricting the amount, because the amount we have committed to is way beyond what the Gaza Strip population needs. So we give them what they need, and we wait for the hostages to be returned. That's what where we stand right now. And don't try not to fall into the propaganda of the UN. They're totally incredible.
So what I'm hearing from you right now is that if the bodies are not returned in a timely manner, it will be very difficult for this 20-point peace plan to move on to the second phase. Does this mean that this whole plan hinges on the return of the hostages' bodies? And is Israel prepared to start the offensive again in Gaza City if these remains are not returned, and to break Donald Trump's deal?
Look, we don't want to break anything. We want to see the plan implemented. That's what we want to see. And we were committed to a plan, and the plan should, and the Hamas accepted the plan. They should perform this part of the plan. If we are going to treat plans as if they mean nothing, then how can we make any agreements with anybody? We made an agreement. They should do what they are supposed to do in the agreement. We did what we were supposed to do in the agreement. We were supposed to withdraw to a certain yellow line, and we withdrew to the yellow line. Once we withdrew to the yellow line, there were 72 hours for Hamas to bring back all the hostages. They brought the living ones. They didn't bring they brought very few of the dead bodies. That has to be solved, and then we shall be able to move forward. There's a bigger obstacle expecting us just behind the corner, and this is the refusal of Hamas to disarm. They have to disarm as well. That's another precondition in the plan before anything starts moving in the implementation of the other articles of the plan.
So let's.
We saw yesterday President Trump saying that they are going to disarm. I hope he's right.
Yes, I was actually going to talk to you exactly about that. We heard from President Trump, and that was yesterday, and said Hamas will disarm, or we'll disarm them, and it will happen quickly and perhaps violently. What do you make of his words? And we've also seen scenes coming out of Gaza of Hamas regaining control and asserting their authority on the Strip. Is this a concern?
Of course, this is the biggest concern, because the entire plan hinges on the readiness of Hamas to disarm. And this disarming issue is not only a matter of who's going to govern Gaza. Of course, without their disarming, all the plan is not going to be implemented, because no international body is going to send soldiers to Gaza in order to form the international stabilization force if Hamas is not disarmed. But this is way beyond that. It's about readiness of Hamas to accept and admit that 7th of October was a mistake, and that they should really be removed from power in Gaza, so that we should be able to reach the core of the plan, which is saying that Gaza will not be in the future a basis for launching terror attacks against Israel. This is why Hamas has to resign and to give up the control of Gaza. And this is why we are all waiting to see them accepting that 7th of October was a terrible mistake. I mean, the rest of the Middle East has already accepted it. All those countries that signed or support the plan understand it. The 7th of October was a terrible mistake and should never be repeated. But Hamas is still against it. And not only that, they are not showing readiness to disarm, but they are busy, as you said, strengthening their control over the Gaza Strip and executing their opponents. That's where we are right now, and it's a big challenge for President Trump and for Israel as well, because we cannot move forward towards peace as is envisaged in this plan unless Hamas is disarmed. And if they are not going to be convinced to do so by the people of Gaza are asking them to disarm because, or some of them asking them to disarm, not all of them, but some of them asking to disarm because they understand that there's not going to be any reconstruction and there's not going to be any hope if they do not disarm. And their friends in Qatar and Turkey ask them to disarm. And of course, the United States and Israel ask them to disarm. And, even the Iranians, there was a big article in an Iranian paper saying that 7th of October was a big mistake. Of course, they look at it from a different angle, but the message was the same. The 7th of October was a big mistake because the Iranian Axis paid such a heavy price. And that's everybody's telling, that's what everybody's telling Hamas. They just refuse to listen for the time being. So if they are not going to show readiness to disarm, there's going to be a need to resume the war. You have to remember that the reason they went to the agreement in the first place was the military pressure put forward by Israel, the readiness of Israel to take over the Gaza city and remove Hamas from power was the main reason why Hamas decided that, okay, we don't have any other option but to accept the deal. This is not a good deal for Hamas.
Yossi Kuperwasser, great to have you on. Thank you for your insight and analysis.
Thank you.
I'm now joined by Paul McCann, Global Head of Programme Communications at the Halo Trust. Paul, it's brilliant to have you on the show. I just want to explain to our viewers that the Halo Trust is an NGO which focuses on clearing landmines and other explosive devices. Can you give us a sense of the work your teams carry out in Gaza and elsewhere?
Thanks very much for having me on. Yes, we've been operating in Gaza for most of this year, doing explosive hazard assessments, which is something that we've done around the world for more than 30 years. Halo is probably most famous for when Diana, Princess of Wales, walked in a minefield in Angola in 1997 that was being cleared by Halo staff. But we've always worked not just with mines, but with explosives. And currently we're working in Syria, where it's very much an urban problem that we're dealing with, as well as a rural issue. We've also cleared cities in Libya, cities in Iraq, and we're currently working in Taiz and Yemen. So we've got quite a lot of experience in working in these kinds of environments where we use sort of sophisticated equipment to unearth buried explosives from rubble and from pancaked buildings in order to allow reconstruction to take place. The difficulty in the Gaza Strip is the scale. The UN has assessed that perhaps 78% of buildings in Gaza have been either completely demolished or severely destroyed and damaged in the last 2 years. And that kind of density of population combined with that level of destruction is going to make it a really complicated operating environment. Where we're working in Syria, there's more space. If we come across a rocket and we need to destroy it in a controlled demolition, then we can set up a cordon around that rocket and around a village, keep all the people at a safe distance and blow it up. That's going to be much more complicated to achieve in Gaza.
And you just mentioned there, the UN has estimated that around 80% of buildings have been damaged or destroyed in Gaza. And there's more than 7,500 tons of unexploded bombs believed to be deep in that rubble. How difficult and how dangerous is this going to be for your teams from the Halo Trust on the ground to try and help up with this cleanup operation? And how many people are you hoping to send?
So the complexity operates at a number of different levels. One is the environment that we're working in. As I said, it's very densely populated. There's so much rubble, and there will also be complicating factors such as the presence of asbestos or other toxic chemicals in the rubble. And of course, sadly, human remains in the rubble. And so we would expect to have to work with imams and other religious figures to ensure that the human remains are treated with respect. Then there are the kind of technical explosive issues that we would imagine we have to deal with. And we'll be dealing with some highly sophisticated, modern, and quite expensive munitions dropped by one side. And then in some contrast, the other side will have been improvised improvised rockets and explosive landmine equivalents, for which there are no manuals because they're almost homemade, and dealing with them can be just as dangerous. But as I say, we have got 3 decades worth of experience in dealing with this. One of the things that we specialize in is repurposing the kind of heavy machinery used in the construction and demolition industry, armoring it up and combining that with bomb disposal experts to kind of essentially rake through and clear through rubble, to do so in a way that is safe for people surrounding them and for our own operatives. We expect to have about 50 teams doing this, maybe 2 international bomb disposal experts and a number of assistants working in close partnership with the reconstruction efforts for several years. Possibly, I think the Arab peace planning released a few months ago talked about 5 years of reconstruction in Gaza. So that certainly could be the time period when we're looking at our most intense work there.
And we have seen pictures of people in Gaza making the journey across the strip to their homes in the north following the ceasefire that was announced. Can you just let us have an idea of how safe it is for them in this urban terrain? Like you said, it's very built up and it's very difficult places for you to operate.
So there have already been reports. I saw reports yesterday that some children had been injured having come across some explosive material, and clearly there's inadequate monitoring and reporting at the moment, given that there's not a great deal of stability. What we find, and it's a paradox of peace, really, and that we found this in Afghanistan in 2021 when the Taliban took over and the fighting ended. We found it in Syria at the beginning of this year when, following the fall of the Assad regime, people want to return home and they want to rebuild quickly. And we find people taking matters into their own hands. I've seen piles of explosives that have been moved by farmers in Syria who wanted to farm their fields, get their spring planting in. And so they've moved devices which weren't safe to move because they wanted them out of the way. And we've come across communities where people perhaps deposit cluster bombs and unexploded shells into wells because they think the water will make them safe and somehow kind of degrade their capacity to explode. So there's quite a lot of urgency about this. The sooner there is stability that allows our teams to get in on the ground and start to work with the construction efforts, the safer people will be, because as I say, people are desperate to get rebuilt. They're desperate to get their lives back together, to go back to their homes and start to sort through the rubble. And the sooner we're able to accompany them and accompany the reconstruction efforts, the more lives and injured people we can save.
Yes, absolutely. And those pictures of people wanting to go back home just shows the desperation to go back to what you know. You mentioned 5 years there to me a little bit earlier, but looking into the future and realistically, how long is it going to be until Gaza is safe and rebuilt?
I think we probably would have to look at it in a couple of phases. And the first may be that 5-year, quite ambitious plan for reconstruction, where there's active, building work going on a very large scale. Then you're looking at a second phase where you would have a residual bomb disposal capacity, very similar, in fact, to the way some countries in Western Europe do. Some of the German states have an annual budget of around 20 million euros to deal with unexploded munitions from the Second World War. So 80 years later, there is still a need for bomb disposal experts who are called out when people are doing construction work or farmers in fields come across things. And I suspect that in Gaza, that kind of residual bomb disposal capacity is going to be required for many, many decades to come, as things that were dropped now are unearthed a long time into the future.
Paul McCann, it was fascinating speaking to you. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Pakistan and Afghanistan have agreed to a 48-hour ceasefire after an airstrike and ground fighting sent tensions between the South Asian neighbours soaring, killing more than a dozen civilians. For more on this, I'm joined by digital media and PR analyst Eyab Ahmed, who is in Islamabad. Eyab, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. I just want to begin with, there's been fierce border fighting between Pakistani and Afghan forces, with reports of casualties on both sides. Is today's ceasefire agreement a welcome development, and could this possibly lead to lasting peace?
Well, first of all, it is indeed a welcoming development. And secondly, Pakistan has always been a big advocate for the peace and stability in the region. And Pakistan always supported the peace. This will, the time frame of all of this, that how much this lasts, depends on the Afghan side. Upon the TTP side, they have been doing insurgencies, they have been doing the attacks, their militant have been doing the attacks in Pakistan. So we, from our side, there has always been the demand of peace. We have always been, we supported peace all the time. Now it depends on how they behave, in the future, because all of this, it started because they started, their militant groups started attacking our civilians. They came at our side and they started attacking our cities, our civilians, our major sites. So in reaction to this, Pakistan started all of that. So it all depends on the other side.
So it's really interesting because there were recent reports of a Pakistani strike on the Afghan capital, Kabul. Pakistan has neither confirmed or denied these airstrikes. What was the reason behind these attacks? And the Taliban says that civilians were killed in these attacks that happened last week, and are saying that this started the tensions.
First of all, Afghan claim is total false. No civilians were killed by Pakistani strikes. And secondly, Pakistan is only targeting the Fitna al-Khawarij, the Fitna al-Hindustan, and the Daesh spots, the militant sites. Pakistan is only targeting those sites which are which carry the main ammunition, which have these TTPs and these Daesh and Fitna al-Khawarij personnel inside. And Pakistan is only doing a targeted operation against the Fitna al-Khawarij, Fitna al-Hindustan, the TTP, and those militants who are involved in destabilizing the peace and regional stability. Pakistan is only doing the targeted operations against that. That is totally a false claim by the Afghans that we killed some civilians. We never went for that. Our main mission was not that. Our mission is just to achieve the peace in the region. And secondly, in Pakistan, we have been warning the Afghan side since a long time now. We have been diplomatically trying to engage them that they should stop acting like this. They should stop by using all of these TTP militants and these people. They should stop creating chaos in Pakistan. They should stop doing it in our soil. We have been doing this a long time. We have been trying to engage with them diplomatically, and they didn't behave till now. So that was the reason we started this targeted operations, and we will continue to do so until they don't behave and they don't stop.
Pakistan is accusing Afghanistan of harbouring armed groups, a charge rejected by the country's Taliban rulers. Does Pakistan have concrete evidence, or is this a baseless accusation which is provoking border tension? Does Pakistan have evidence that Afghanistan is harbouring militant groups?
So the night when all of this border tension started, the very next day, the Director General of the Inter-Services Public Relations from our army, he did a press conference. He showed up all these evidences where these Talibans, where these militants, they were involved in doing these suicide attacks and involved in killing our civilians. We had all the evidence. We showed it in the press conference. Our military spokesperson, he clearly showed all the evidences. And secondly, we also have the evidences, and we showed the evidences that how these militant groups and these TTPs and Khawarijis, they are operating. They are being a proxy of somebody else. They are being used by somebody else, and they are being used against Pakistan, against the Pakistani soil. We showed the evidences of that, and it's not just on this our side of the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. They have been doing this in Balochistan as well, in our other province, Balochistan, been engaged in that as well. So we have all the evidences. We also showed the evidences on the media. That is totally clear. So that is, again, I will say, our stance is just simple, that we want to achieve peace in the region. That's it.
Just finally, I do apologise, we are running out of time, so just let's go for this last question here. Pakistan's Prime Minister has said he intends to nominate President Donald Trump for a second Nobel Peace Prize. Are relations between the US and Pakistan warming, especially after the border clash with India?
So Pakistan, the current leadership of Pakistan is clear that they will do this constructive diplomacy with anyone who will try to achieve the peace, and especially with all the major global powers. And that's the reason the Pakistani Prime Minister again nominated President Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize, because Pakistan wants to achieve peace in the South Asia, in the Middle East. Pakistan has done it. Pakistan has proved it. And Donald Trump, nominating Donald Trump for this Nobel Peace Prize also shows this, that Pakistan's clear stance for peace was fulfilled by Donald Trump, as seen yesterday, that it was the 8th ceasefire that he has done. So we support the world leader or the major global power, whosoever will support the peace.
It was fascinating to talk to you, Eyab. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
You're welcome.
Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says NATO allies are expected to deliver firepower to Ukraine soon. Speaking ahead of the NATO Defense Ministers meeting in Brussels, he credited President Donald Trump for pushing allies to step up. Hegseth said Europe's new plan to buy US weapons for Ukraine shows peace through strength. Former Kenyan Prime Minister Raila Odinga has died at the age of 80 years old. A key figure in Kenyan politics, he ran for president 5 times and helped resolve the 2007 post-election crisis. Known as Baba, he was celebrated for his fight for democracy and also human rights. Right-wing US influencer Candace Owens has been blocked from entering Australia after the High Court backed the government's decision. Officials said her controversial views could incite discord. Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke called it a win for social cohesion, and Owens must pay the government's legal costs. Owens appealed the High Court on the grounds that the power burdened the freedom of political communication. And Chinese customs in Shandong have seized 60,000 maps that mislabeled Taiwan and left out key islands in the South China Sea. Authorities said the maps endanger national unity and cannot be sold. As British Prime Minister Keir Starmer looks to implement a digital ID card system in the UK, he's hailed India's Aadhaar system as a massive success. And during his recent visit to Mumbai, Starmer held a meeting with the co-founder of the Indian tech group that helped deliver the ID database more than a decade ago. But the system has been met with some criticism. For more on this, I'm joined by Commodore Chitrapu Uday Bhaskar, Director of Society for Policy Studies in New Delhi. It's a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Aadhaar is now part of India's fabric. How crucial is the identity document for citizens and their access to important services inside of India?
If I can use one word, I would say that the Aadhaar card, as it is known, is very critical, very important in India for the citizen in terms of a series of transactions in one's daily life. As you said, it was introduced about a decade ago, and this was done by Nandan Nilekani, a very highly respected Indian IT mogul, part of the Infosys company. And what Aadhaar has done is that it has given a 12-digit identification for every Indian citizen and allowed the digitization of a number of services. So today in India, for instance, financial transactions, even very modest levels of financial transactions can be completed using Aadhaar in a very limited time span. So to that extent, it has made digitization a very visible kind of phenomenon in India. But yes, there are some concerns because it is driven by biometrics and the fact that personal data could be misused is one of the concerns about the Aadhaar card. But I repeat the one word, it is very, very important for the citizen in India, the Aadhaar card.
So we've spoken about the importance of it to the citizens in India. Now the UK government is actually hoping to bring in digital ID cards, but there's been fierce backlash, including warnings of expanding state power and also concerns that it might not control immigration like they hope it could. Do you think these concerns are warranted, or has India managed to figure out the system and improve it?
You know, I would say that these concerns have been voiced in India also. It's not as if the Aadhaar is a silver bullet and that it can be used both for the citizen and in terms of its security relevance, which is particularly to track illegal immigrants and all the criminal activities associated with illegal immigration. And in the Indian case, there has been a lot of anxiety about terrorism. So these are some of the other strands associated with Aadhaar. But my sense is that the backlash, the word that you used in UK, is not misplaced because Aadhaar is a tool. It is a tool of surveillance, and much depends on the integrity with which the state decides to use this kind of a capability. This is also driven by technology. There is an increasing amount of digitization, and if this in turn is linked with AI, there are many possibilities for the state to misuse this kind of a tool. So I would say in summary that the concerns in UK are not misplaced, but I hope there would be a constructive debate to regulate the state and its ability to use technological options such as the Aadhaar, which I gather would become the Brit card if it is introduced in UK.
Yes, I haven't actually seen a possible name for it, but the Brit card could be one. So, good idea. The UK Prime Minister did meet with the co-founder of the Indian tech group who helped deliver the ID card database we're just talking about. What do you make of this possible partnership between the UK and India? How do they work as partners when it comes to technology and the advancement of tech, as you just mentioned?
I think this is a very good opening, in terms of the potential, because the United Kingdom, UK, has a certain pedigree and very rich experience in terms of technology and innovation historically. And India and the UK have a legacy relationship. And the visit of Prime Minister Keir Starmer to Mumbai in particular, what was earlier known as Bombay, has been very important, I think, in laying certain tracks for cooperation, and technology is one of them. And if the Aadhaar is taken to Britain and they are able to improvise and adapt it for use there, I think it would open avenues for further India-UK cooperation in digitization per se. And if this is positive in terms of the UK experience, particularly to deal with illegal immigration, it may have a relevance for the European Union, because this is a very major concern there. But these, as I said, are potentialities that need to be worked through. And if India and the United Kingdom lay a very strong foundation, because language is a very important component for any kind of technological cooperation, and English is going to be a very useful component of this kind of cooperation, and India's proven skills in software. So I think, again, there is a complementarity, and one hopes that the British Prime Minister's visit would open avenues for further technological cooperation. And this is also complemented by India's investment in UK now. It's going to bring money and jobs. I think there are about 10,000 jobs that are being spoken about. So it's looking like a potentially win-win situation.
And Commodore, we are seeing an increasing amount of cyber attacks and online fraud. It's becoming more and more common. Is there a concern when it comes to digital IDs and the Aadhaar, as you mentioned? Is it a concern that important information could actually end up in the hands of hackers and could be sold on? Because this is a massive concern that a lot of people do have.
As a security analyst, I would say that there is a very strong probability that information as stored in the Aadhaar could fall into the wrong hands. And this has happened. There have been breaches and personal data has been brought into the black web. There have been reports of personal data derived from Aadhaar being sold and so on. So I think this is a very, very important area, again, perhaps for collaboration, cooperation between countries such as India and the UK, which need to evolve protocols. And I think this is actually inevitable when we talk about technology. If there is a technology that would provide a certain amount of benefit and it is data-based, you will always find criminal elements who would try to find loopholes and misuse. To the extent that data is the new oil, as is often said, I think the hackers, the criminals, and those who are trying to challenge the state and its regulatory mechanisms would always find a way. So I think this is a bit of a cat and mouse, and the state has to be alert. But at the same time, state integrity should be beyond reproach. And that is going to be the challenge for democracies, that they will not misuse the powers that technology will allow them to acquire in terms of surveillance and the citizen.
I have never heard data is the new oil, but I will not forget that you told me that. Thank you so much. I've never heard that before. I do like it. So data is the new oil. Fascinating conversation with you, Commodore Chitrapu Uday Bhaskar. It was a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Pleasure. Let's take a look at the top business news now. The US government has seized more than $14 billion in Bitcoin linked to a Cambodian businessman. The founder of Prince Holdings Group, Chen Ji, was charged with wire fraud and money laundering. Prosecutors said it was one of the largest seizures of Bitcoin in the whole US history. Gold has surpassed $4,200 per ounce threshold for the first time ever today. Its rally has been driven by rising expectations of US interest rate cuts. On Monday, Bank of America forecasted that gold would average around $4,400 a troy ounce by 2026. A reminder of our top stories. Israel says one of 4 bodies handed over by Hamas overnight does not match any of the hostages. Pakistan and Afghanistan agreed to a 48-hour ceasefire following a wave of fresh fighting and an airstrike. Right-wing US influencer Candace Owens has been blocked from entering Australia after officials say her controversial views could incite discord. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also follow us on X. Plus, we'll be back in a couple of hours' time with W News Extra. Goodbye and thank you.